Okay, now we're getting into the most exciting part of the afternoon for me. It's the last mile. You probably would say, well, Lawrence, you would say this because this part of the afternoon is called the GDF Tokenization Forum Observation Deck. And the GDF Tokenization Forum, which is chaired by Anthony Woolley from Unera and Barige Tinley from Archax, with the secretariat of Matty Boys from GDF, runs bi-monthly hybrid fixtures and simply endeavors to put the state-of-the-art RWA tokenization in front of the public community. So without further ado, can I ask Natasha and Matt McDermott from Goldman Sachs to come up? And I know you're going to really enjoy this, so let's welcome Natasha and Matt.
Yeah, so hopefully we're going to wake you all up now with a very interesting topic that if you catch me in a corner, I will be able to talk to you about for ages. But first of all, Matt, welcome. I don't think Matt needs an introduction, unless you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, it says that I've run the digital asset business for Goldman Sachs for 4 years now, and have certainly seen a lot of transformation over that period, particularly in this space that we're going to talk about.
So I think everyone today is talking about use cases and scale. That's kind of the key message, the key takeaway from today. From your perspective, tokenization of collateral, let's just talk about that and the use case. How is Goldman thinking about tokenized collateral?
I mean, I think, and perhaps people have heard me talk before, I do focus an awful lot on, the actual move away from proof of concepts and really look at kind of initiatives that can actually kind of create value for the organization. And collateralization of, or tokenization of collateral, should I say, is a really good, kind of testament to that. We're doing it on a relatively small scale, but the value proposition is there. And that could be for intraday FX, intraday repo, and even when you start to think about some of the other kind of financial plumbing, repo, securities finance, which is obviously the title of this one. And then if you start thinking kind of more holistically, the collateralization of derivatives. And so it's iterative, but what you need to show is, within the organization, what is the commercial value proposition? And I think, from the top down, it's very clear what it is. And, a stat that I've just recently kind of been looking at is, if you look at kind of firms like us, we have a big intraday kind of proportion of our balance sheet. And it's anywhere between 10 to 30% across the market. If you think that costs institutions anywhere around 100 basis points, that means your intraday cost is anywhere between 100 to 300 million. So if you can actually use the tokenization of collateral to be more nimble and use all of the benefits that we'll go into, that is actually that will have a profound impact on your kind of cost as a firm. And so I think, from a firm perspective, we see a huge opportunity. The ability to scale and increase adoption is obviously key, and again, a theme obviously that's been running through the day. But as we start to see more asset managers, more sell side get actively involved in this space, it's starting to really kind of now, I'd say slowly happen. It's a long-winded answer to your question.
No, I think it's really interesting because we talk about the benefits, the ROI, we talk about not doing POCs or using POCs as a launchpad to scalable production use cases, but really tokenized collateral is that scalable use case. There is a demonstrable value proposition in actually doing that. Why, focusing on this area, why is that more giving you more scalable opportunities than more back office post-trade kind of improvements? Is there a direct correlation being to the front office, would you say?
I think if you actually look at kind of, I guess, the collateral markets, and if you look at the systems with which, we continue to trade, these are on systems that are 30, 40 years old, in some cases. And so you have the kind of custodial fragmentation, there's the unsynchronized settlement. So the actual technology, really does transform the way these markets can operate. And, we've talked about kind of settlement efficiencies, which breed into a broader kind of operational set of efficiencies. The ability to de-risk, the example that, I often give is, looking at some tokenization projects we're working on, actually having T+0 pricing as you then use that as collateral. Today, collateral has a T+1, T+2, so there's a lot of embedded jump risk that you see in these transactions that can very easily kind of be minimized. And so, I think, actually, when you look at kind of, the value proposition coming back to that again, I think it's hugely compelling. And it's one that's very easily, articulable.
How do you see this tokenization of collateral actually helping risk management and being more efficient for the banks?
Yeah, I think it probably manifests itself in a few different ways. I think, going back to the point about the pricing, I think that's hugely compelling because you really can remove a lot of that jump risk. And, we have facilities on, for example, today where we borrow collateral to cover shorts, very valuable part of kind of the business from the prime perspective. But often the collateral that's allocated, has, like I say, 1-2 days. So there's a lot of haircut that you apply to those transactions. If you can even just minimize that by half, by allocating collateral with a T+0 pricing, that means you can reduce your buffers and therefore reduce your capital that's allocated to that. That's a good example. Another is, we have a lot of assets that are held domestically that don't kind of feed into normal kind of financing flows. That ability to tokenize those and actually finance them with your traditional kind of lenders, I think is hugely powerful. And I'm kind of also of a view as well, when you actually even look at some of the kind of neobanks and the deposit financing, yes, the insured amount obviously, is incredibly kind of robust, but if you start to look beyond that, people can actually double click and easily take their kind of deposits out. And therefore, secured financing becomes, I think, ever more important in terms of your liability stack. And then if you've got these tools that allow you to have, that synchronized settlement, so think of intraday, you can actually use the precision of the technology, and I know Scott's going to talk about that more after this session, to have settlement to the second, and that could be intraday repo, that could be intraday FX. That's something that really you just can't do with today's systems. And again, that's hugely powerful. As a US bank, for example, we often, have shortfalls in sterling and euros, Swiss francs, even Canadian dollars, for example. And so that ability to use the fact we're long dollars, swap into the different currencies for the minutes that we need it or the hours, that becomes very powerful and just enables you to more proficiently manage your balance sheet.
I suppose with GS being a global bank as well, you also have that follow the sun type of risk that you're managing. So presumably this tokenized collateral helps you follow the sun, be more efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, an example that's probably been talked about quite a lot is banks have, for many years been doing the JGB treasury trade. It's a nice basis trade, creates, value for institutions. But because you cross time zones, you have to pre-fund, which means there's liquidity involved and a certain component of capital. And so that ability to really think about eliminating that by seamlessly doing it, on a 24/7 platform is very powerful.
I've been talking a lot today with different tokenization projects. A lot of people are tokenizing money market funds, yourselves included. In terms of that, is that the first wave of assets that you're seeing being used for collateral, or is it extending to other asset classes?
I think I can see Guido here as well. I think kind of when you think about tokenizing collateral, it can manifest itself in a whole variety of different ways. And, just using HQLX as an example, you can actually kind of collateralize, you can tokenize a pool of collateral, be that delivered by tri-party or a singular asset, and then, actually finance in the way that you kind of traditionally do, but you benefiting from doing that on a DLT. And I was going to go with that. Wrong with the question?
Just talking about the different types of assets that could be used.
Oh, yeah. But I think, going back to money market funds, I mean, for me, if I think about, what's the value proposition, money market funds is interesting because that's an asset class that for many, many years has been pushed by a lot of asset managers, understandably, to be used more in the kind of traditional financing kind of flows. But the reality is the instrument, the LP investment, is just non-transferable. Tokenizing it suddenly creates a lot of utility and a very powerful use case for collateral. It's A1, P1 rated. I think hopefully over time, it will be treated as HQLA, just given the underlier, assuming it's kind of governs in cash. So that suddenly becomes massively powerful. I mean, there's 6 trillion plus of money market funds, available in the US. and significant size in Europe as well.
Let's talk about industry adoption, because we know the numbers work, they're meaningful. Is it now a case of everyone getting on board with this new world of tokenized collateral? How do people get involved?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I think everyone kind of talks about scale, talks about adoption, and one of the things, having spent a bit of time kind of over the last 3 to 6 months internally presenting, at the management committee level, and then to the kind of the head traders, how can we kind of accelerate the adoption? And I think, one of the simplest ways, quite frankly, is making sure that you penetrate the right decision maker, whichever institution it is. Because I think if people properly understand the commercial proposition here, it's kind of an obvious, thing to be spending time and energy on. Basel 3.5, as I'm sure many of you are familiar, even though the kind of incremental cost of capital probably wasn't as severe as banks were kind of expecting, it's still going to be incrementally more expensive. So capital's more expensive. Rates have probably lingered higher than, folks would have liked. So the whole cost of liquidity and capital is still there. So I think for businesses that continue to look at the discipline of bringing down costs and being more efficient with their key resources, this play is a very obvious one. And I've spent time educating over the last year or two plus within the firm, and no one's in doubt of the actual value proposition, but you need, obviously, adoption. So I think it really is trying to get the right decision makers and get that kind of top-down push to focus, And the other point I'd make as well, banks have a different approach to how they allocate costs. This is pretty boring, but we as a firm allocate it, right down to the trader level, and so they know what their cost of liquidity and capital is. Not all banks necessarily do that, or other institutions. So you just got to work out how the institutions operate, going back to the point, just to make sure you go to the right decision makers, because if it's held at the management level, it's educating them, making sure they understand how they can bring that cost down.
I think it goes back to cost per trade as well. If your traders are seeing that they have a direct benefit, then they're going to move towards it. And actually, the savings are huge. Or the P&L impact is huge, let's put it that way. Like if they're discounting at LIBOR plus instead of LIBOR minus, then it's a massive gain for them.
Agreed, yeah.
Talking more about industry adoption, how do you see interoperability playing into...
I should turn this one back to you, I think.
Yeah. How do you see it playing into collateral mobility?
I think, interoperability is key. Again, a topic that's well socialized. But if, you're looking to kind of really I guess, leverage the whole market, the potential lenders, it goes without saying having access to all corners of the market is absolutely key. And, there are a number of different, kind of interoperable solutions out there, one of which obviously, is yourselves. And so, yeah, I think it's key that can be done in a very seamless and efficient and riskless way.
Yeah, I think it goes back to not introducing risk. And I suppose with all of this new technology, some of the applications out there are introducing risk. If you're receiving it as collateral, you don't want anyone else's risk.
100%, yeah.
Yeah. So is it, I suppose, going on the risk point, what other things are you considering when you look at interoperability and that collateral mobility?
In terms of risks,
yeah.
Or just, I think risks, I think when you kind of are looking to kind of, I guess, transcend across different platforms, really properly understanding the risk profile there. But as I look at the risks more broadly, I think, if you go to a platform that has that, kind of multiple kind of market participants, can the platform operate at scale? Is it robust? Thinking through all the kind of associated risks, there. And then the kind of obvious risks as well, which I think as more and more people kind of become active, the legal and the regulatory. So I think for pioneers in this space, I've probably spent an awful lot of time really thinking through that. But I think as you see more and more activity, you start to get more scale, probably the latter two, more easily addressed.
Yeah, it goes back to a trust point as well. I always remember back in 2008 when Lehman defaulted, just getting access to collateral, even if it was a regulated custodian, was difficult. Yeah. So you've got to have that trust. You've got to believe in the platform. You need to know there's no stay risk on
100%,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, if you're getting it as collateral, you don't want anyone in the middle wrapping or minting or burning something else. So, no, it's important.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to the transparency, the tokens obviously give you.
Yeah. You touched on regulatory considerations. We're kind of try to avoid regulatory conversations, but how does it need to evolve for you in the collateral space specifically to unlock this market?
I think it goes back to the point that I just made. I think, the regulators, and we're seeing that, with increased activity in this space, have provided clarity. There's activity that we're doing in Europe. We're looking to do more in the US. So I think, regulation, has been a topic, but I think, like I say, it's jurisdiction by jurisdiction, it differs. But I think, it is and has progressed in the right way, and that's quite frankly down to a lot of the effort, probably people in the room, a lot of the kind of associations that have been doing all the advocacy, pushing hard. So I think it has been a concerted effort, and it's something, certainly within this space, I think is probably easier than some of the other areas that we operate.
There's been some good papers recently, ISDA guidance, obviously some Basel guidance just around obviously tokenized assets and almost the purity of them. It goes back to that counterparty risk and introduction of layers. So yeah, how's that helped you frame your kind of view on collateral solutions?
Well, I think for us, we just look at kind of the platforms that we're looking to kind of operate on and spent a significant amount of time due diligencing and actually kind of working through what the risk kind of profile is. And as a function of that, got comfortable with the risk or lack of. But I think, we're kind of talking a lot about the risk, but I think actually for me, the pendulum really shifts the other way for tokenized collateral is the fact that it actually de-risks the market significantly more. I think there's a reliance, if I think about, kind of some of the platforms with the trusted third parties, they're the ones who think about the kind of the legal risks and they validate. So you get other key people involved in the process who help you get comfortable from a risk perspective.
How are you seeing much movement into the crypto space from a collateral mobility perspective? Are you seeing more use cases there? Because we've seen the BIDL money market fund, we've seen other money market funds come to market, specifically focus on the crypto natives. How do you see that transition?
Yeah, look, it's great what a lot of the asset managers have done in that space. I think, from my perspective, they've been very fortunate. There's a bit of asymmetry in terms of what, they're able to do and we are able to do. And for us, we're not able to transact point in time on public blockchains, as I'm sure everyone knows. And therefore, for us, really, it's around focusing scale for institutional use, where we focus on the platforms that we can operate.
Very good. Yeah, we've got 3 minutes. I suppose, is there any questions and you wanted to throw it back to the audience? More in terms of, is anyone looking at money market funds, use case for collateral? Is there anyone in the room looking at that? Put your hands up if you are. Not many. How can you get more of these, Matt?
I would say, actually, I'd be interested, a raise of hands, how many people are looking at tokenization for collateral purposes more broadly? Their organizations.
There's Fidelity over there, yes, okay. Yeah, we're getting a few. But I suppose we need to scale it now. We need to bring them to the table and say, let's get this done. And whether they're buy side receiving it as derivative, collateral, or they want to tokenize themselves, it's really about those scalable use cases now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think it goes back to a point I made earlier. I think, for people who are really kind of serious about this space, it's kind of taking that step back. What is the commercial proposition for my organization? Why does this make sense? And then really making sure that the right business leaders are aware of the value proposition.
We often talk about leaving impact in the world. How do you see this making an impact? Like tokenized collateral, how is it going to actually fundamentally change financial markets?
I think, when you look at the use cases of blockchain technology, this is probably one of the most profound because, the actual value proposition across intraday, the impact that you can have there, I think you'll start to see proper kind of trading of intraday liquidity, be it FX or intraday repo. These are markets that you don't trade today. We've created tradables that allow you to kind of capture that risk, by the minute. So I think that could be a new market that manifests itself and makes the market more efficient and actually broadens the market. So that is truly transformational. And then I think if you actually just look at the seamless way in which you will be able to allocate collateral on the forward, be it for derivatives, securities finance, or your repo transactions in an efficient way that just makes the whole process more efficient, I think that becomes hugely kind of compelling. And, if you're trading these products, you'll know no different. All you'll know is your business is suddenly a little bit more efficient.
Great. Any questions for Matt? Okay.
Sorry, hi. I wanted to ask if you, how do you see the need for central bank money on chain or other forms of money on chain? How important is that?
Actually, do you mind not using the microphone, because I didn't really hear that, actually, I'm sorry.
Sorry, the need for on-chain money.
On-chain links.
The availability of money on chain.
Oh yeah, money on chain is key. Yeah, sorry, it's very hard to hear with the acoustics. I mean, that's key. I mean, yeah, digital money obviously is kind of the missing kind of ingredient. And again, what we'll need is a scalable digital money solution, which again is probably nothing you don't know. Stable coins, obviously, there's a lot of progress, both from a regulatory, and use case perspective. But again, for banks that have to kind of adhere to kind of the capital rules, they can be quite inefficient. So it's really thinking through, obviously you've got the JP Morgan coin, you've got kind of others that are looking to develop their offerings in this space. Plus there's a number of companies looking at kind of central bank solutions, some of which are on the public side, some on the private. And to me, that's where you get real scalability. But I think that's going to be key, scalability in a trusted, capital efficient way. And I think, that's probably a year or two away, quite frankly, maybe more.
Yeah, I think it's all about the connectivity and making sure those connected layers actually start to talk and operate, and then we'll bring it all together.
Agreed.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Matt. It's been a pleasure to chat to you. Round of applause, everyone.